Outpouring of grief as the two RUC men shot dead by the IRA are buried. A close finish forecast in the Tory leadership race. Now Thatcher backs William Hague. £5 million of lotto money to go towards private charity lotteries. A Garda chief says Dublin's O'Connell Street is one of the safest in the city. Good evening and welcome. The two RUC men shot dead by the IRA on Monday were buried today, and hundreds of mourners attended each of the funerals. Services were held in Lisburn for Constable David Johnston and in Tandragee, County Armagh, for Constable John Graham. The Presbyterian moderator, Dr. Sam Hutchinson, described the killings as a watershed for the North and a slap in the face for those honourable people who had been willing to try talking to Sinn Féin and to take risks for peace. Pastor Edward Betts said he wished he could drag the IRA killers to see their victims' devastated families.
The shootings in Lurgan left a community numbed and two families in mourning. For Constable David Johnston's sons, aged 7 and 3, their love for their father was expressed in a final tribute written by one of them, Louis. To them, he was the greatest dad in the world, and they wished this had never happened. 10 years ago, he'd been married at St. Columba's Presbyterian Church. This morning, his widow Angie returned, not as a bride, but as a widow. The local minister, Reverend Malcolm Scott, spoke of the cold-blooded calculation with which Constable Johnston and his colleague John Graham were shot dead by the IRA near Lurgan RUC station on Monday.
There is no way that his body should be lying here today, murdered in the name of some false god.
While the funeral was taking place, people from both sides of the community in Lurgan continued to express their sympathy, signing books of condolence outside the police station. The Presbyterian moderator described the murders as a watershed for the North. He said some of those churchmen and politicians who had taken risks for peace now felt they had been exploited by the Republican movement.
These killings were a slap in the face for so many people of goodwill who were trying to promote understanding and take risks for peace. Now at least some of them feel that they were simply used, that their good nature was cynically exploited, and that they are now abandoned to the reproach of those who would say, "We told you so."
There were more emotional scenes in the village of Tandragee in County Armagh, where the RUC Chief Constable again joined the cortege as the remains of Constable John Graham were taken to the local Baptist church. Among the mourners was the Fine Gael TD for Louth, Brendan McGahan, who said people in the Republic deplored the killings. Pastor Edward Betts said Constable Graham had been devoted to his wife and 3 daughters, and there was not a shred of sectarian hatred in his heart. The killings brought a cloud of darkness down on the North as tension increased in the run-up to the July marches. But for the Presbyterian moderator, there was a ray of light in this tragedy, and that was, he said, the chorus of condemnation from Ireland, Britain and the United States.
The Ulster Unionist leader David Trimble has said his party is ready to pigeonhole the issue of decommissioning to allow talks in Northern Ireland to move forward to a substantive stage. Speaking to an audience in New York this evening, he said the time for wishful thinking about the peace process was over. Mr. Trimble said the British Prime Minister Tony Blair must now ensure that the settlement train moves ahead with or without Sinn Féin. Following the killing of the 2 RUC officers, he urged loyalist paramilitaries not to retaliate, but he said he wasn't optimistic that their leadership would be able to hold the line.
David Trimble came to New York on a public relations mission and chose a lunch hosted by the National Committee on American Foreign Policy to give the keynote speech of his visit. In front of this illustrious audience, he had a less than optimistic assessment of the peace process.
I think we need to end wishful thinking.
Mr. Trimble said the killing of 2 RUC officers in Lurgan on Monday was an attempt to destabilise Northern Ireland. He said it should convince Tony Blair to push the peace process forward, with or without Sinn Féin.
Now, the government has received an answer, and having received that answer in the shape of this week's violence, I think that the Prime Minister must now ensure that the settlement train really moves, And if it does so, we in the Ulster Unionist Party are ready.
David Trimble told his audience there was now no obstacle to substantive negotiations in the north. He said that his party was now prepared to pigeonhole the issue of decommissioning.
Let's pigeonhole it, and if it becomes necessary or relevant at a future point, we'll come back to it then. But if we pigeonhole it now, then there is absolutely no obstacle to entering into substantive negotiations as of now.
David Trimble hasn't always had the best relations with American groups supporting the peace process. But in the wake of Monday's killings in Lurgan, he had a receptive audience here today. During his trip to New York, he also had a telephone conversation with U.S. National Security Advisor Sandy Berger, and is due to do interviews with America's leading media organizations, including CNN and the New York Times.
UVF prisoners in the maze have threatened to kill a senior prison officer by the weekend if the authorities don't settle an ongoing dispute in the jail. Last night, 2 families escaped injury in arson attacks on the East Belfast homes of prison officers. Visits to the UVF wings of the maze have been cancelled because of the protest.
The teenage family of one of the prison officers had a narrow escape after petrol was poured through their letterbox and set alight. The house filled with choking smoke, and 2 of the officer's daughters just managed to escape out a skylight onto the roof. Their mother and another daughter had to be rescued by firemen. The family was taken to hospital for treatment for smoke inhalation. In the other attack, the occupants of a house managed to extinguish the flames. The incidents are linked to an ongoing protest involving UVF prisoners at the maze. The inmates are refusing to cooperate with new procedures introduced after an attempted IRA breakout. This evening, the UVF prisoners escalated their threat, saying that a senior officer in the jail would be murdered by the weekend if the new routine wasn't altered. Meanwhile, the RUC confirmed that they are questioning a number of men in connection with the murder of Balahi GAA official Sean Brown last month. The killing was never admitted by any group, but was thought to have been the work of the breakaway Loyalist Volunteer Force.
The new leader of the Conservative Party